o'clock. We'll call to order the August 22nd normal meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board for Tarpon Springs. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Seaman?
Here.
Mr. Kouskoudas?
Here.
Mr. Vesey?
Here.
Ms. Vigil?
Here.
Mr. Koulianos?
Here.
Mr. Zimbelis? Mr. Andriotis?
All right, we have a quorum, so that brings us to item number 2 on our agenda, the approval of the minutes from April 18th of 2022. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Do I have a second? Okay. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Seeing none, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Koulianos?
Yes.
Ms. Vigil?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
Yes.
Mr. Kouskoudas?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes. All right, that brings us to item number 3, the quasi-judicial announcement and swearing of speakers. Could we have that?
Yes. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Planning and Zoning Board in a quasi-judicial, let me start over. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Planning and Zoning Board in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established by the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. At this time, I'd ask the board if there have been any ex parte communications with any of the applicants. Seeing none, I will then ask if there's any conflicts of interest with any of the applications. I will note that Mr. Koulianos,
Yeah.
wanted to get that right, and I have already spoken. Application number 2 tonight, you have a conflict on, correct?
Yeah, I own the piece of property across the street from the subject property being brought up, and it'd probably be best that I recuse myself, even though I have no issue with the ordinance, the application. I just think it's best.
Okay, there's some paperwork the clerk will provide for you to fill out. Anyone else have any conflicts of interest with tonight's any other applications? Okay, anyone that's going to testify, please stand and raise your right hand. All right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to item number 4 on our agenda, application 22-77. It's a conditional use approval to allow for a roadside stand of outdoor plant sales located at 18 West Orange Street. Do we have a staff presentation, please?
Yes, Allie Keene, Planning and Zoning. The subject property is located here, outlined in yellow on the screen. It's on the north side of West Orange Street, just west of North Pinellas Avenue. This property is located within the city's special area plan, which is all of the area highlighted in gray on the screen. So it's surrounded by the special area plan to the north, east, and south. And then to the west, there is residential office zoning. The applicants are here today requesting conditional use approval for a roadside stand, specifically a garden center with outdoor plant sales on the subject property within the T5D transect zone. Garden centers and outdoor plant sales isn't a specific use identified within the SMART code, but it does fall within the definition of a roadside stand. And that's defined by the code as an area or structure used for displaying and selling farm products, including plants, flowers, seeds, grasses, nursery stock, trees, and tree products. And it may operate seasonally or year-round. The applicants are proposing to display plants on 3 10-by-10 shade structures that will be within the yard area of the subject property. And the only site modifications they're looking to do is to expand the existing parking area to accommodate 5 parking spaces and 1 accessible parking space. The existing building that's on site will just be used for office and storage space, not for retail sales. This is an aerial photograph of the subject property. The proposed plant display structures are the three green squares here in the front. The blue area is highlighting the existing parking area where they'll expand that to accommodate additional spaces. And the existing structure on the property, which is currently used for residential purposes, is at the very rear of the property and will be again used for office and storage space. The applicant did provide an example of a shade structure, which is this picture here on the screen, just to give you an idea of what they're proposing to do. Again, this is within the city's special area plan, specifically the downtown character district. The intent of that district is focused on Tarpon Avenue, which is considered the main street for the community redevelopment area. The suggested uses for this district are intended to promote retail development and encourage medium density and mixed use residential density or development to support the retail along Tarpon Avenue. And the downtown character district is all this area highlighted here in yellow. In regard to the review criteria for conditional use, with conformance to the Land Development Code, the proposed use does not require any significant or permanent modifications to the property. Any future improvements would be required, as always, to meet the standards of the Smart Code and the Florida Building Code if they're applicable. The property is located within the downtown character district, which again promotes retail establishments and a mix of uses. The use is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan as well as the special area plan. The property is located in the city's historic district. However, again, the applicant's not proposing any modifications to the existing building, and there are no significant property improvements. The proposed use is temporary in nature and is not expected to have any adverse impacts on the historic district. The property is within a mixed-use area, has a range of uses that include retail, office, and residential. The site is buffered fairly significantly from existing landscaping and mature trees along the west property line, and the property to the east is actually owned by the applicant or operated by the applicant, which is a retail store. And it's not. We do not intend to have this expected to have an adverse impact on the surrounding property values. The proposed use does not require any extension or new public services. And again, this project does make use of an existing developed property within the downtown, and it does enhance and carry out the intent of the special area plan. With that, staff would recommend approval of Resolution 2022-28, granting conditional use approval for the operation of a garden center within the T5D transect zone. Staff does have 3 recommended conditions of approval, which are outlined here on the screen. The first is that merchandise shall be limited to plants and typical garden supplies, specifically excluding bulk storage of mulch, soil, rock, shell, and other items of that nature, and shall not include it should not include yard decor. The second is the applicant must obtain any necessary building permits for the change of occupancy type for the existing building. And number 3, on-site signage would be required to be reviewed by the Heritage Preservation Board. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a few questions.
Okay.
When you say the merchandise, would that also include pots themselves?
I would say that pots would be a typical garden supply.
I just
We're
wanted to make
looking,
sure.
yeah, to eliminate large.
The other thing, I'm real familiar with the property. Actually, there used to be a house where it was before. I remember when it burned down, I used to stay there in the summers. But the house that property occupies is not a historical home.
No, I don't believe that it's in the historic district, but it's not a contributing
It's a block
structure.
home, it's not a historical home. Why would they be required to get signage from the Historical Preservation Board when it's not even a historical property?
So Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, but any new signage is required to go to the Heritage Preservation Board, regardless of the structure being contributing or not contributing. If it's in the historic district, it's under that purview.
That's accurate? Okay. All right.
Any other questions for staff?
I have one, and forgive me. Did that answer make sense to you?
No, but
Back to the signage, and I didn't mean that in any way other than not a historical home. It's in the historical district. Why would they have to submit their sign to the Historical Preservation Board? I see Pat in the background.
Yeah, so, well.
I'm super slow, right?
that's
So it
okay.
takes 2 people to explain to me.
Yeah, so how the code is written for the historic district, different things require the board to approve things. Some things are staff level. Signage is something that regardless of the structure itself being contributing, is required to go to the Heritage Preservation Board for approval.
Heritage Preservation Board, and I
Correct.
see her approaching, but before you answer, we recently passed a tomb of a sign ordinance that is so complex, it's almost impossible to read and virtually unenforced. That's my opinion. So they have to go through that tomb first and meet all those and then submit to the Preservation Board, and now the young lady gets a chance.
I was just going to add that the signs in the historic district are more related to the ambiance of the district. That's do you see what I mean? That's kind of what they're aiming for, is that signs, first of all, you are right, they go through the sign code, the signs have to be smaller, that's for starters. But right now, the way code is written, Heritage Preservation Board is supposed to look at all of them.
Okay.
We'd like to maybe modify that, I think, look at that, maybe for simple channel signs and wall signs.
Yeah.
But they do look at everything right now.
Yeah, you got a 60s building and have to put an 1880s sign on the 60s building. That
Yeah,
just
and
doesn't
good
make sense.
example, they don't want a huge, weird,
understand.
maybe
I
big neon
understand.
sign in
It's
the
just an
historic
overlay in
district
the area
regardless of the property.
because it's in the area it applies.
So I'll, just a couple more short questions. So the Heritage Preservation Board does not get to weigh in on the verbiage or certain things. That's going to be handled by the new sign ordinance. They get to weigh in on whether or not it fits the character, the design of the area.
Correct.
Would that be fair?
Yes, and just for clarification, content of the sign, the wording is something that we can't enforce.
That's right, that's
But
a
right,
key
but the
element
design
of
of the
that
overall
ordinance.
sign is what they're looking at.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I have a actual question. There was a specific verbiage about limiting, I don't mean to yell. Merchandise shall be limited to plants, typical garden supplies excluding rock and soil mulch, and shall not include yard decor. Was that verbiage that's taken from an existing ordinance or suggestion of the staff, or was that brought by the applicant?
Sure, this was suggestion of the staff as a condition. I know in the application, the applicant did indicate that they were not going to have yard decor with this display, but I'll defer to the applicant to respond with that. But that was a staff recommendation. It's not from any sort of specific code or anything.
Can I drill into that a little bit? Yard decor could mean anything to anyone else. It could be a pot. It could be a cute little sign that says, "Come here." I'm concerned about this being excluded from the applicant, meaning that, and again, you could defer to the applicant, we'll hear from them, that it really restricts them to absolutely only plants, and which is fine if that's their design, but I think it seems too aggressive to say just yard decor, because there's a lot of different things that could mean. Now, sure, do we not want perhaps them selling those plastic lawn chairs? Fair enough. But for a plant place not to be able to put pots in or things that are associated with plants, like little trellises that could be considered yard decor, I might be a little concerned about
Or
that.
a
Yeah,
gnome,
so,
or a
so
gnome.
that's
A gnome.
this was difficult to put into words, so it can be clarified, it can be much more lenient, but with the typical garden supplies, we were more so getting at, I think pots, trellises, small things that you typically would have we think is appropriate. The yard decor is more so we're looking at, decorations, like sometimes there's statues or metal yard art, those types of things is what staff was recommending not be permitted at this location. But it's up to the board, and like I said, the applicant can probably elaborate on their intent.
Is there anything within the conditional use that would restrict yard decor?
Not within the conditional use, but I
Meaning
think
there's
that.
nothing within the statute or the conditional use that's just staff recommendation that maybe you thought it would best to carve that out of that?
Yeah, so this is, the staff recommendation is a condition. So we're saying we believe that a, small garden center with outdoor plant sales and typical garden supplies is appropriate. We don't think it's appropriate to have outdoor display of merchandise outside of that, such as, metal art, statues, things of that nature.
Like all the stores that we see on alternate 19 that are on every street corner all the way up and down, that we want to rein that in and not have it there, although we have it everywhere else.
For this particular application, yes.
Okay, cool. I'm good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's the end of my questions.
I have a question. With their parking, they're saying that they're expanding 2 spaces to 5 spaces. Are these spaces actually gonna be like wide spaces? Because, like me personally, I know when I go pick up plants, I don't pick it up in my car, I pick it up in a truck. Are these gonna be actually, or they're not gonna be like compact spaces, they're actually gonna be larger?
So the code would just require a typical parking space size, which is 9 by 18. But again, I can defer the applicant on their intent. They'd have to go through a site plan process just to get that approved, a minor site plan process.
I
Any
have
other
questions for the
questions?
applicant, but I'll wait for the applicant.
All right, if there's no other questions for staff, we can hear from the applicant if they'd like to make a presentation. State your name and address first, please.
My name is Ginger Almagitas. My address is 314 Pineapple Street, Tarpon Springs. And I don't need to make a presentation, but I'm glad to answer any questions.
I have questions.
Okay, John.
Hi, Ginger. Another disclosure, Ginger's son, Nick, is, in all intents and purposes, a member of my family, so, and he's a wonderful young man.
Thank you.
So, anyways, but I've cleared that that's not a
Right.
conflict in this case. So again, these are recommendations of staff. It's not necessarily what we have to pass tonight.
Okay.
So let me ask you about this little extra line here. It says, shall not include yard decor. Like, what kind of stuff would you have?
Majority, 95% is plants, but I do have wind chimes occasionally. I also might have a bird feeder, things like that, but they're hung within the plants, the hanging plant.
But I mean, would you, let's say you wanted to have a little gnome or something that somebody could.
Well, we have indoor retail next door, so
Okay.
most of it would be in there.
So if you wanted to have the gnomes, you would have them on the
Yeah.
other side.
Yeah.
All right. But do you think that line in any way would hinder you from being able to
I think-
do reasonable expansion of your business?
I think the way it's worded, it possibly could. It
Okay.
could say that, no,
All
you
right.
can't sell a wind chime, or you can't sell a bird feeder.
We can always suggest that that
Yeah.
be excluded. How about the security? Like, do you take the plants in every night, or?
No, we're gonna put a camera system. What I have found, because I've sold plants for decades, is most people that love plants are not thieves. So for the most part, there hasn't been an issue. So a good camera system that could even alert me at home, I'm around the corner.
But you have a similar business down the street, so you're used to this
I'm used
whole
to it
thing.
with the plants, yeah.
Okay, doing that.
And that's why there won't be as much yard art. They would steal that.
Yeah.
They would do that.
And it's a nice, your yard business is really nice and pretty and
Thank you.
is well attended and taken care of, so I would assume you're gonna do the same thing.
Absolutely.
All
Make it as
right.
beautiful as possible.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question for staff as far as definition is concerned. When we say plant or plant accessories or yard accessories, to distinguish, it's gonna be hard to distinguish between that and yard art, okay? And I think what's difficult for us, I think for me to define, is I like the novel idea that you're doing there, but as was pointed out, if you drive down alternate, you'll see where it's all yard art. And that's not what the intent is. So I'm trying to make it, how do you define a distinction? And maybe I'll look to staff,
I was
legal
gonna say,
opinion.
I think it's gonna be up to you guys.
Okay.
That's where, you're gonna need to, at the point when there's a motion made, whoever makes the motion can draft it with that language the best you can, then you guys can talk it out and get to the point you want
Yeah,
to
and I
be.
think that's what the city's looking to limit, correct, the yard art,
Yes.
not
Yeah, and if
yard
it would
or
help-
plant accessories.
One thing that might help with that is maybe we could, and I guess we have to get fairly specific if we did it, but limit the size of,
That's getting
Four
really,
items.
I think in, you know, it's a hard to police, but, you know, I'll go ahead and make a motion if we get to it, but,
I don't think we're ready.
yet.
It looks
Well,
like
I
someone
was-
might have questions for the applicant still.
Jumping the gun.
I would still like to ask about the parking. I'm assuming since you have this kind of business, you're aware that the majority of people that will come to this kind of business are gonna come with larger vehicles.
Right.
So you're accommodating larger vehicles in your parking for the 5?
Including myself, who
Okay.
drives a big Sprinter.
Yeah.
To there, so yes,
I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
you're welcome.
are there any further questions for the applicant?
I have one.
Okay.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Justin,
Hi, Justin.
and I'm desperately, Ginger.
Yes.
Miss Ginger, I wanted to get your name right. Would you prefer to have the ability to have some garden-style accessories available with your plants, per se, maybe some pots or such?
At this time, there's no plan for that. I'm involved with one of those places on 19 that sells all that garden art.
Okay, okay.
So we like the idea of keeping our businesses completely different, bringing customers to different businesses because they're going to see something different. So my main thing is going to be plants with maybe, like I said, a few wind chimes or bird feeders. Small pots only, like orchid pots, but we're not planning any big pot displays, because that also adds to some security issues. So that's why it's not in the business plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I guess we can open the public comment section. Do we have members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, we don't have anybody by Zoom or anything, I assume, either. All right, I'll entertain a motion then.
I'm gonna give it a try. I make a motion that we approve 22-77 with the following conditions. I would redefine what the condition number 1 to include yard accessories, which would include pots if you ever decide you want pots, bird feeders, wind chimes, but to exclude yard art. And that's, you know, I know that's gonna be hard to police, but to exclude the yard art. So, motion to approve with the city's recommendations as far as I've amended them. If that makes any sense.
Do we have a second?
And I'll second the motion.
Can we have or is there any
Discussion?
board discussion?
Yeah. So, Mike, I think if we exclude those last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words, and shall not include yard decor, if we exclude those, and then you want, I don't quite understand your,
Okay, I'm changing number 1.
Yeah.
Where it says merchandise shall be limited to plants and typical garden supplies to include yard accessories.
oh,
Okay.
okay.
But that yard art shall be excluded. In other words, what you see on alternate 19 across the whole mom is that those big metal structures, you know, that yard art. yard accessories, which would include bird feeders, pots, wind chimes, things that you would typically put in accessorizing your yard or your garden, okay? But art isn't one of them.
I'm going to speak for him. We're going to exclude 5-foot roosters.
And 15-foot giraffes.
And who polices this motion?
Animal control, but that's,
So,
but John, it's just hard to define,
yeah, I hear you.
you know, what the limitations are, and I'd rather just
I know.
group it in a category
But
of,
understand that, that the applicant has a location on alternate 19 that sells those kind of things. And so she doesn't necessarily have to bring
I
them
know
to
that.
that location.
yeah.
Well, and
And
it
then-
is a
and-
conditional use also, so that if a different person picked it up to continue the business, they would have to
Yeah,
get their
yeah.
own conditional use.
No, I hear you. I hear
So
you.
that would make sure nobody in the future,
I'm just not trying to
Did it.
preclude them from offering something other than plants.
Okay.
Even though that's their intent, but giving the opportunity to expand, so, okay.
Can we ask the applicant if that's something that they can live with?
I don't-
I'd recommend you not. She's already
Yeah.
been
Yeah. 'Cause
questioned,
you've
so
already
if you
been done,
question
so-
her, then the
Okay.
staff
I
is to
guess,
talk again.
I guess
and
I
we-
have a motion and a second, so I.
All right.
all right, if there's no other board discussion, can we have a roll call?
May I read the motion that I have, just to make sure it's right?
Sure.
To approve application 22-77 with the city's recommendation, except that condition 1 should be changed to merchandise shall be limited to plants and typical garden supplies to include yard accessories, bird feeders, and wind chimes, but excluding yard art such as large animals.
That'll work.
That works for me.
Mr. Koulianos,
Yes.
Ms. Vihil,
Yes.
Mr. Vesey,
Yes.
Mr. Kouskoudis,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman.
Yes. All right, that brings us to item number 5 on our agenda, application 22-80, conditional use approval to allow for a hotel in an existing building located at 100 North Ring Avenue. Can we have a staff presentation, please?
Yes, Ally Keene again. Okay, this property is located at the intersection of North Ring Avenue and East Orange Avenue, outlined in yellow here on the screen. It's just 1 block north of downtown Tarpon Ave. The applicants are here today requesting conditional use approval to utilize the existing 2-story historic structure on the property as a hotel. As you may all recall, this property is currently in the process of being rezoned and amending the land use to incorporate this property into the city's special area plan. Within the special area plan, they're looking to go to the downtown character district and the T4A transect zone. Hotels are a conditional use within the T4A transect zone, which is why they're here for you today. They're proposing again to use the existing structure on site within the existing footprint as a hotel. They're looking to do an 8-room hotel that will have a small lobby and reception area, again, within the historic 2-story structure. And the existing single-family home that's also on the property will remain as is. Just an overview of the site. Again, there's 2 historic structures on the property. The structure to the north is an existing single-family home that is a contributing historic structure. It was moved to that location for the construction of the carriage townhomes across the street back in 2015. The historic structure to the south is, again, contributing to the district and was identified as a livery stable on the 1909 and 1913 Sanborn maps. In 1926, this structure was previously a hotel, the Scotia or Scotia Hotel, and later was used as apartments and other residential uses. Right now, it is currently vacant, and the applicants are looking to restore historic use of the property. Within the downtown character district, it allows for a density of 50 lodging rooms per acre. Looking at the size of this property and also accounting for the existing residential use on the property, they'd be allowed a maximum of 14 rooms. They are only proposing 8 rooms at this time. The applicants did provide an overview of the hotel operations, which was a part of their application packet. They stated that the owner and operator's office and maintenance department will be located across the street at 201 East Center Street. Their business model implements a self-check-in kiosk in lieu of a staff lobby. Reservations are made online. Guests will check in and check out through a managed kiosk in the lobby. And any service requests can be made by guest phones or at the kiosk in the lobby and will be directed to the maintenance team that's across the street. The smart code typically requires a minimum of 1 parking space per lodging unit. However, the code also has a provision that states that the adaptive reuse of existing structures and sites is not required to provide any additional parking. However, the applicant does acknowledge that parking is important to provide for this particular use. So they are looking at putting parking at the rear of the property. This is a look at a conceptual site plan. They're proposing to accommodate about 11 parking spaces, and that would accommodate both the parking required for a hotel and a single-family house that are on the property. This is just looking at the surrounding character districts within the special area plan. Again, this property is proposed to go into the downtown character district, which is the area here in yellow. Surrounding uses is really a mixture of uses. There's residential uses, office uses, and retail uses. And again, it's 1 block north of the downtown Main Street. In regard to the conditional use review criteria, the parking lot will require a site plan as well as Heritage Preservation Board review and approval as a separate application. All interior renovations and modifications will comply with requirements of the Florida Building Code. The proposed project is proposed to be incorporated within the downtown character district of the special area plan. Again, it's only 1 block north of Tarpon Avenue, which is the district's focal point. The downtown character district is intended to promote retail development and mixed use to support the commercial entities on Tarpon Avenue. And a small lodging facility within walking distance of the downtown core is consistent and carries out the overall intent of that character district. This use is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the special area plan. As stated previously, both structures on site are classified as contributing historic structures. All exterior modifications would require Heritage Preservation Board review and approval. And the proposed use will not negatively impact the historic significance of the structure. It's rather restoring a former historic use of the property as a hotel. It is not expected that this will adversely affect adjoining property hours. Again, this area is mixed use in nature, has retail, office, and a mix of different residential uses. It is again north of downtown by 1 block. Public facilities are available to the project, and the project will not negatively affect the city's ability to provide services. And lastly, the proposed use makes use of a historic building within the city's downtown and enhances and carries out the intent of the special area plan. With that, staff does recommend approval of Resolution 2022-29. We do have 4 conditions of approval. The first is that this conditional use is contingent upon the approval of the rezoning and land use amendment. The second is the hotel shall be limited to a maximum of 8 rooms. The third, a site plan must be submitted within 1 year of the conditional use approval. And fourth, the applicant must obtain all necessary building permit and Heritage Preservation Board approvals for the proposed building and site modifications. Public notice was sent out for this application, and we did receive 1 written response, which was included in the backup materials with your packets. And with that, I would be happy to answer questions.
I have one question. Do we know when the property was used historically for lodging purposes, do we know how many units it had?
That I don't know. I do know, based off the Sanborn maps, it was 1926 is when that was identified as a hotel, but I don't have the number of rooms.
Other questions for staff?
How is it being occupied now? As an apartment?
It is currently vacant. I believe most recently it was maybe a single-family home, but the applicant may have more history on that.
Does the application and the future land use, I know we're focused on the library stable being used as 8-unit hotel, but that single-family residence that's there is half the property. And so does that change the possible future use of that single-family home, i.e. meaning, I know it's a historical structure, but now is that single-family home optioned for hotel use in the future also?
So So that structure would be able to be any permitted use that the transit zone would allow in the future if it changed from single family. If it were to be hotel, that's an expansion of this request, and they'd have to come back to have additional rooms to utilize it for lodging. But say that it changed from, and I don't have the use table in front of me, say that it allowed for a small retail in that transit zone, say that went from single family to a retail and it's permitted use by right, then yes, it potentially could do that. But I'd have to verify the tables of exactly what permitted uses could go there.
So let me ask the question in a different way. Is the intended use and the intention of these ordinances that that home remains and used as a single-family home in perpetuity? Or is the door left wide open for that home to be converted at a later time that maybe should be part of this application now?
So, speaking of the intent, that's the applicant to provide their future intent, but from what we understand, the intent right now is for that to remain as a single-family residence and the livery stable building to be used for the lodging use. Both of those structures are on the same property, and they're both proposed to be rezoned and incorporated into the special area plan. So in the future, if it gets rezoned, anything that potentially is allowed in that district could go into that structure if it's permitted, or if it's a conditional use, they'd have to go through this process.
Every time you ask a question, it makes me ask a question.
Please.
Okay, I guess my concern is density. I think that's maybe where you were going, where you're using the, I don't know what the density for that area is, but you're using most of the density on the proposed hotel. And then the question becomes if that was ever separated, because I think there's two separate lots that these properties sit on, correct? It's not one lot. It's,
Historically, yes, they were.
they're two lots. Okay, so my concern is, the density. If we limit, right now, what would be the density?
Sure. So I'll try to explain it in a couple ways. So if this was looked at being straight residential, forget the hotel, based on the size of that property and the density that's allowed for that character district, they could have a total of 5 dwelling units. Right now, there's 1 in the single-family home, so theoretically, there's 4 units up for grab if it was straight residential. The code allows for something called density averaging. So for a hotel, and that's for mixed use, hotel has a different density allowance, which is 50 units to the acre, whereas residential is I want to say it's 15 units to the acre. What we did for the calculating of the hotel for that averaging is we take out the single-family home, that square footage, and whatever's left over is what the density could be applied to. So it's an averaging. Now, in the future, if, say, they want to split that property and have the house be separate, we would have to look at it and say, okay, well, can what's proposed, the existing lot that's left over, can it accommodate the 8 lodging units? And can the remaining lot accommodate 1 dwelling unit? We'd have to look at that when the lot split came through.
Would the parking, in effect, limit that? If you need 1 parking space per lodging unit, and with the parking that we've got there, then that only leaves 3 parking spaces to support whatever use might be in the single-family home.
Yeah, we would look at that as well, because right now this is looked at as a site, as one development site. If they were to be separated, we have to look at all aspects to make sure that when they're separated, everything is accounted for. And whenever a property is proposed to be split, it comes through our review process.
And Ally, I actually owe you an apology. I didn't read all the way through what you supplied because there is a response to questions supplied by the owner's representative, last page, in quotation, clarify the existing single-family home at 108 North Ring Avenue will remain as is, in quotation. And I'll read their response. The parcels have been combined and the 2 structures are owned by a single entity. We have no plan to modify 108 Ring Avenue. So in effect, the applicant has said, we're not changing the house. It's supposed to stay as is.
Well, yeah, but I'm just worried about the density of the house. Okay, all right. But I could ask the applicant that.
Any further questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Good evening, everyone. I guess not technically a formal presentation, but maybe a little bit of an
Start with your-
explanation.
State your name and address.
address, please.
Joe Kokalakis, Buena Vista Drive, Dunedin, Florida. This project, I mean, this building itself has been a building that I've been looking at for the last 30 years. It was, as Ali said, originally built, I guess, from what we gather, as a stable. It was sometime or another a hotel, a Scotia hotel. And then when Ingrid Jones purchased it with her husband, who actually was in the State Department, their intent was to operate it as a boarding house, bed and breakfast. Her husband got ill and passed away, and eventually they just kept it as their single-family home where her children were living there with her. When she passed, there was a reverse mortgage on it, and don't believe Tom Selleck, and ultimately I wound up buying it from the family. More and as a way to preserve it and to figure out what made the most sense for that property. It wasn't really with a particular plan except to clean it up, because, like I said, I've been here for a long time. We looked at various options. We had Ed Hoffman make some sketches. We looked at just not going for any sort of entitlements and converting the livery stable into 4 apartments. Some made sense, some didn't. We looked at doing it as 4 townhomes and try and squeeze them in and put new doors on the north side. We looked at having separate uses, a cafe on the first floor and maybe 1 or 2 apartments on the second floor. None of that seemed special. None of that seemed like it would do justice to what we're trying to do to this building. So over the course of our work on other projects, we came across a CLT, a cross-laminated timber package, where they would do the entire interior in cross-laminated timber, have exposed wood columns, exposed decking. With that, I asked Ed Hoffman to kind of do a layout for hotel use, and he came up with the 8 units. I mean, we could have made smaller units and made it like a hostel and maximized the hotel entitlement of 14, I think, hotel rooms. But for this to succeed, it needs to be done right. It's going to be sustainable with the CLT. We're going to take advantage of the tax credits for carbon emissions. We're going to take advantage of tax credits for solar. It has to be something that someone is willing to pay a premium for and come. It's going to be technologically cutting edge, where the guests will come in and it'll be fairly standalone, but I will, of course, my office is across the street. And the single family home, we combined the parcel, partly for the density. I do have in my head that a caretaker home, maybe that's where I'd work out something there, but not that I would want it to be a condition of this. Anything, so right now that's the plan, like we said in our presentation or our submission. Any change to that plan, which may happen, at one day down the road, would have to go through, I imagine, the same approval process. So I don't see, kind of spending a lot of time on if we split the property up and go back to a hotel, because then I'm assuming someone at staff would have to review how many units I'm actually entitled to with the smaller piece of a hotel, what I'm entitled to for the single family, and what uses I'm entitled to do on that single family based on the downtown location. But ultimately, the purpose of all this, and I'm trying real hard not to make it a passion project because people go broke on passion projects, but, the goal is to use this project as a little bit of a showpiece for our construction company, to get some press for our construction company as to, whether it's the technology or the sustainable methods that we're going to use to restore it, to restore a building that's been an eyesore and put it to a good use. And it seems to make the most sense as far as a use, when finally we have a downtown core that people want to spend a couple nights in, and they want to spend, they don't want a typical hotel, I don't even want to get to that subject, but they don't want like a typical, stay. They want something special. They want a DeLand, they want a Charleston, I'm currently, I have submitted in Dunedin for a 79-key hotel. The management company of that group, Charlestown Group, they haven't signed that they're willing to manage this small 8-unit property. They don't think that I need them, but they do manage an 11-unit property in Charleston. So, that is what we're going after. We're going after kind of a unique market where people want to come here, whether it's for the Anclote River and to enjoy the river, or the shops, the restaurants, the breweries, the distilleries that we have now in our downtown core. So, that's kind of the overall plan. I'm grateful to staff for everything they've done, kind of guiding us through this process and the Pinellas County process. But that is the vision for what we're trying to do here.
Any questions for the applicant?
My biggest concern was the density, utilizing where the proposed hotel, and then at a future date, increasing the density of the existing single-family home north of that. But I think your presentation kind of answered some of my concerns.
Mr. Kokolakis?
Yes.
I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us about your project.
Thank you.
It is a bit, I wasn't sure how you described it, a labor of love or a special project. I think when you get inside there, it's going to be one of those.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, are there members of the public here wishing to speak on this item? Approach the microphone and state your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Gustavo Trujillo. I live in 109 North Gross Avenue. My property directly abuts this project. I want to ask you, how do you think that will affect my property? You see those 3 kids over there? They use that back alley. All right, is it really necessary to add parking? I would like to say another thing. This sounds awfully similar to an Airbnb, which I think there are limitations on Airbnb. If I'm perhaps mistaken, I think that there are limitations to the use of Airbnbs in our city. I don't know if Mr. Kokolakis perhaps have done some market research. And by the way, coming from a lot of respect, I do like everything that you've done for the community. However, we have the Blue Bayou Inn on Tarpon Ave. We have the 1910 Inn farther down the road. We have the Tarpon Inn by the bayou. We have Ashley's Bed and Breakfast just down the road over here on Groves. Right catty corner from here, there's the poolside, what's the name of it? Poolside Cottage, right across the street. 1 mile radius from this property, we have the I think it's the Tarpon Shores Inn on 19, and not very many few yards away, there's the Hampton Inn and the Quality Inn suites. And that's not even including all the Airbnb and Vrbo offerings for transient lodging. Transient lodging by the building code is defined as any type of lodging for rent under 30 days. Do we really need more of that? And it would be awesome and great to restore this historical use to this property, but I don't think that it fits within the character of the area to add more transient lodging. And I'm not even gonna go about adding more hard surface to the back of these properties. And also, it goes against the future land use map approved by the city, in which these 2 properties are marked as residential. So it's that much more commercial encroaching and approaching residential homes, properties. So, I wouldn't mind if it was an actual apartment. There's a big shortage of rental units that are not just short-term in the city. And your own housing proposals for what's the word? It's not proposal. There's the housing component of the city plans that wants to encourage the availability of affordable rental housing in the city. We have many people that work service industry around here, restaurant employees, dishwashers, waiters. We need that component too. I wouldn't be opposed to any of that. But a hotel that sounds very similar to an Airbnb or a Vrbo, I don't know about that. I honestly don't know about that. Furthermore, there's 2 entrances to this parking. There's already an Airbnb right next to this property as well. The house next door, it's also a historical property or a historical house, or within the historical zone district. It's just one that is right next door to ours, and they've been okay. They've been okay, but at times I've had to call the owner. It does appear that there's plenty of properties around here that are owned and are being offered for a rental, short-term rentals, but nobody's living in there. So again, we're adding that kind of use to the area. And again, I don't know that this would be the best use, in my opinion. Also because it's gonna affect me directly. You know, I had to put a sign on that back alley because cars already kind of go and use that as it should be. But having this many parking spaces and this many people coming in and out at all times of night, during the day, especially, there's not gonna be a manned reception to this. So basically it's just through an app. How is that different than an Airbnb or a Vrbo? None. So, I mean, I appreciate what he's gonna do with the property, try to bring it up to, repair it and bring it back to its historical looks and fix it and all that. But honestly, eight short rental units over there, and increase parking and increase impervious surface. I don't know. The neighbors already have some water intrusion issues from some works that were done in their backyards, and they have a little bit of a feud going on. Because the time it rains, there's water that gets into one of the neighbors' structures in the back. So how are all those things going to be addressed? I don't see any available square footage in this project for rainwater. Where is all that going to go? Any retention ponds? Nope. It's just going to magically disappear when it rains? I don't think so. So, I would not be happy if this happened to me. The property of my house will probably go down abutting a parking lot like that. And those 2 properties are supposed to be residential, not commercial. So I rest my time for my case. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak? Approach and state your name and address, please.
I'm Lauren Trujillo. I live at 109 North Gross Avenue with him and those 3 kids. He neglected to mention that our neighbors also have small children, and the people on the other side of us have 3 children under the age of 5 as well. So there's a lot of kids running around. Obviously, we protect them the best we can, but even when the Airbnb is occupied, there's tons of children running around the alley. There's also multiple cars that block the alley. So that's a pretty congested area, just to kind of get at the logistics of it. I also hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you are not paying attention to the imminent homeless crisis that is going to be happening, we're just a few years away. Here in Tarpon Springs. I published a book on it last year. The signs are trickling in, so we actually don't need boutique hotels here. And we don't even really need affordable housing. We need housing for people that are in those service industries, working minimum wage jobs, or maybe just right upon the edge. So I would say, if you would like to bring positive press to your company and to your name, with all the other wonderful high-end projects and beautiful things that you have, maybe now is the time for a little philanthropy. Maybe now is the time to start being a steward of your community and giving the people that are not here for a luxury boutique experience a place to live. And then the last thing I'll mention is if you've done any research, as I have, on just the human trafficking issue, if you're going to open a hotel and you're not going to have a check-in desk where a person at a desk can issue a key and see the people coming in and out, where you have to walk through the lobby to your car and unload and reload, it's a very attractive setup for human trafficking to just swipe in and do this sort of Airbnb remote check-in procedure with no one at a desk. So I'll kind of leave it at that, just to say, you know, I'm in favor of this. This is a beautiful building. We knew the family that lived there for years and years and years. There's a lot of wonderful things that you could do for the downstairs area, whether it's, you know, helping out the community, helping people in need, having it to be a walkable place. You know, we just had a neighbor move out whose mom was 92 years old. There wasn't a place she could walk to get a newspaper without going across 19, like general store, place to, you know, anyway. So I wanted to just hit on that there's more kids around this area that were mentioned. If we're concerned about sustainability, heat island effects and impervious surfaces are something we need to consider. Finally, imminent homelessness issue coming away, and you all really need to pay attention to that. And then finally, just the high risk of human trafficking with this sort of Airbnb, no person at a desk. So anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you. Thank you for letting me bring my children. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, do we have any online or any communications otherwise?
No, we don't have any online.
All right. In that case, I guess I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I do have a question with staff.
Okay.
Is there a different definition for a boutique hotel versus an Airbnb in our code?
So an Airbnb by the code is defined, it's a short-term rental or a seasonal rental is the definition in the SMART code, and then hotel is a separate definition. Density is calculated differently. Short-term rentals or Airbnbs have to follow residential density. So if they did full short-term rental, they'd be limited to the 4 units that are on that property that are left for just residential. Hotel is different. The other difference between the definitions is typically an Airbnb is the rental of a full dwelling unit, as opposed to hotels are typically more a room with limited, you know, accessories like maybe a refrigerator or microwave type thing. So those are the main differences between the two.
Thank you.
All right. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion on application 22-80 to approve the application with the conditions set forth by staff.
And do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Now we can have board discussion. Anyone have comments or thoughts?
I would just say to the people that spoke, we appreciate your input. It's important. You know, believe it or not, we try to listen to your concerns. But overall, when we weigh, you know, the benefits versus some of the concerns, you know, I think the city probably would benefit by having a boutique hotel in that particular district area.
And the other thing to that point a little bit is they do have to comply with Water Management District and all other city codes regarding drainage and parking and all that. So what you see here may not be exactly the final site plan, and the final site plan has to come back to us, and then it has to go to the building department before, any actual construction could occur.
Yeah.
And the Water Management District standards for drainage are very strict.
And there are lighting requirements too for any parking, so.
Any other board discussion?
Don't-
All right. Can we have a roll call?
Ms. Vihill?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
Yes.
Mr. Kouskoudis?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes. All right. That brings us to item number 6, related to the rules of procedure. It's a resolution approving addition of the meeting announcement that kind of came out of our workshop a couple months ago. It's the verbiage that was provided to you here that would be stated sort of like the non-judicial statement at the beginning of our meeting to explain kind of what the purpose of the board is and how we operate a little bit.
That was a great summary of this item. And,
Did I steal your fire?
yeah, no,
Sorry.
that's okay. The last time we talked about this, you all wanted to look at the language. And I feel like there's, if you do consider using this statement or something like it, might be a little long-winded. I wrote it, but you might want to cut it back or change it. If you want to do something, I've got 2 options here. I've got a draft resolution. Page 7 has your order of meeting procedure. It could be inserted there, or I could just simply put it on the scripted agenda for the chair for every meeting. And then that way you wouldn't have to unadopt it if you ever didn't want to. But either way, it's easy to do either way. Or you could just take no action and not do it at all.
Does anyone have questions for staff?
I don't have a question so much as that I want to take sole responsibility for driving the concept, and I want to openly and profusely thank Patricia McNeese for keeping it alive, probably for me, but I generally think it's a good concept, verbiage aside. So I want to say thank you very much for doing that. And that
I
means
mean, this was the one item that didn't get resolved yet. Some of your items went to Board of Commissioners and other ones were for, but I mean, I would have done it just for you, for sure, but it was because the whole
okay. So now
had
hold
this
on.
outstanding.
Light humored and serious at the same time. At the same time, I don't believe that she would have picked it up and carried it if she didn't think it had value, because she's smart and consistent and does that. Now, I was still reading something else. Chairperson Seaman, so what is the action that are at our fingertips today?
It sounds like from what Patricia's saying, we either have a choice of adopting it so that it's part of our regulations that we have to make this statement at the beginning of every meeting, or she can just put it on the agenda so that it's there, that we read it at every meeting. But if we wanted to change or not do it anymore for some reason in the future, it wouldn't be part of our regulations. So there's those 2 options, or just doing nothing at all, I guess.
So we're either in and out at tonight's meeting, like right now, either it becomes part of the process or it does not.
Yeah, I mean, you could put it off if you want to, but, I mean, I suppose a third choice would be to put on your agenda, so the first First thing you do is a call to order. Second thing, you could just put chair states purpose of meeting or something, and that way you could change the statement anytime, but you'd always have to make a statement. That would be a third option we could do.
I'm kind of a do-it-now kind of guy, and if the board would be patient enough with me, I'm going to read the whole thing out loud from edge to edge. Anyone?
That way you can see how it sounds.
Good. Okay. So I'll do my best. Thank you for attending the City of Tarpon Springs Planning and Zoning Board meeting. The purpose of the Planning and Zoning Board is to conduct public hearings on the items that come before it. The Planning and Zoning Board has reviewed the evidence in the agenda packet for each item on the agenda this evening, including the application materials and the staff report. The board will consider that evidence along with any new evidence or testimony provided at the public meeting. The board will consider all of the information provided at this hearing in accordance with the quasi-judicial procedures by which it is bound. I will ask the city attorney to explain these quasi-judicial procedures at the appropriate time. This board uses these procedures to judge whether the application meets the intent of the city's adopted comprehensive plan and future land use map, and whether the application conforms to the city's currently adopted land development code and zoning atlas. The board will render a decision on each item in the form of a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, who will take the final action on the item. The general hearing procedure for each item called by the chair is as follows: staff presentation, applicant presentation, affected party presentation, public input, staff applicant rebuttal, and finally, board motion, discussion, and vote. And I think that's a pretty succinct summary of what we do. And although there's not sometimes people in the audience, I think it carries weight and is worthwhile for those people that take the time to attend or watch us on Zoom at a later date. I think that's excellent. Thank you very much, Patricia McNeese.
I mean, it seems to be a good statement to me. The only, really, as far as I'm concerned, the two ways to go that make sense would either adopt the statement or adopt that there will be a statement of purpose at the beginning of the meeting, and then if over time there are things we wanted to massage a little bit in the statement, we would have the leeway to do that.
You could do that.
Yeah, with the Charter Revision Committee being, maybe working on items that can be voted on here that do not have to go to the Board of Commissioners. So there may be some changes that would have to be made to this
Right.
statement.
Yeah, we did send that one forward
Yeah.
as
So
one of your recommendations.
I kind of like, was it choice C?
Or we could adapt it, or
Where it's an optional read by the chairman, but it can be something. I think that's,
So,
and then it can also be altered at any time to be
Yeah.
be updated by either the chairman or by staff recommendations. So I think that's
Sure.
the best way to go.
so put it in your rules of procedure that the purpose and mission of the Planning and Zoning Board chair would read purpose.
Yeah.
That there will be a statement of purpose, but,
Okay.
and we'll start out using this, but if things need to be changed, that leaves us the flexibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Do we need a motion to that effect?
You
make a
need
mo-
majority agreement. You don't have to have unanimous agreement, but majority agreement.
It doesn't
By
have to
way
be
of a
made in
motion or just,
I think that's probably the only way to do it.
yeah,
That way everyone knows what they're voting on.
okay. So,
I motion we follow the suggestions of the chairperson. Door number 3.
I'll second.
Do we have further discussion?
Nice work.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Koulianos?
Yes.
Ms. Vihiel?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
Yes.
Mr. Kouskoudis?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes. All right, that brings us to item 7, staff comments.
No
Have anything
comments.
else for us?
No.
That brings us to board comments.
It's your-
Sorry, I'm
one-
not staff,
One
but-
second, hold on, please. It's your prerogative that we're not in a motion application. It's not on the agenda. It's your prerogative as the chair if you want him
Is
to
it
speak.
appropriate for further comments at this point
There's
in the
no
meeting?
application before the board to be discussed, so I would say no. Public comments already happened. The applications are closed.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're past the point for public comments in the meeting. I'm sorry.
Sure. Okay.
I do have a board comment, and maybe staff could fill us in. We turned in our homework a couple weeks ago.
Thought I missed that part.
And, yeah, and I'm just trying to see what the next step would be, because I'm curious to see some of the findings of what was presented.
Sure. So we are actually continuing to do some more outreach with the public. We just posted on our Facebook page, as well as we're going to send out a newsletter through Connect Tarpon Springs to try and see if anyone has any neighborhood organizations or just a general organization that they'd like us to come to and talk to about the plan. So we're trying to get more public input. So we collected all the board's input that was provided to us and gave that to our consultants to compile everything together. There was lots of information that came into us, which was super appreciated. If there's any additional information that you guys would like to pass on, we can give that to our consultants still. We have some time. We're looking probably to do this additional outreach period until the end of September. And then after that, that's when the consultants are working on basically the next step, like a strike-through underlined version, and that will come back for more public input. But thank you for doing your homework. We appreciate it.
Any further board comments?
That's a great idea.
Seeing none, we stand adjourned.
That's a great idea.